So we've come in here now, and before the break, we looked at the 5 iterations of the calculator program, and we also went in and we wrote all of our clear functions for the Joes Automotive. All right. So again, as mentioned, what's left are to write the non-clear functions. So in other words, we want to write the function that will add up this stuff, then the one that will add up this stuff, then the one that will add up this stuff, then the one that will add up this stuff, and then the one that will add up everything. So that's what we've got left to do. All right, that's enough to do. If we don't finish it by the end of class, no worries. And we pick it up next class, and then we go into the talking, the lecture for the chapter. Shouldn't be a problem. All right. So, the first one that we're going to do here, just do them in order. All right. We've got our button calculate routine here. And when we click our calculate routine, it's nice. Ideally, at least, it makes sense to everybody. What we want to have happen is we want all of those calculations to take place. All right? And guess what? I'm going to write that last. Because what that's going to allow us to do is write all these other routines and not worry about it. So we will go and put that stuff in, but we're going to write the routines. We're going to skip the button calculate for right now. All right? And we're going to run right down to this oil lube charges. And again, what you're going to find as we start to look through this stuff is the majority of the code that we write is going to be very similar. All right? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a local variable in here. So anytime I create a local variable inside of a routine, so if you create a variable inside of a routine like this, again, these variables are local. All the ones that we did outside of all the routines, all the ones up here, those are all global. All right? These are local because we only want to work with them in here. And that's going to be OLC, stands for oil lube charges. Okay, there's nothing magical about the name. But that's what I'm going to end up returning here when I get done. All right? And it's pretty simple. I want to say if my oil change, remember I can say equal true, or I can just say dot checked, but I'll leave it at that. What does this mean? Somebody tell me, in English, what does this mean? Yeah, that means that this one has a check in it. All right? So if that has a check in it, what I want to do is I want to come in here and I want to take this oil loop charge and I want to add to it my constant, which was oil. So I'm adding 26 to it. Then I'm going to write another if that's going to check the checkbox for the lube. And if that's true, now does that make sense to everybody what's going on in there? It's the exact same thing that I just told you, that I showed you before the break. See, ideally, again, by modularizing this code, you're able to concentrate on just a part of the code at a time. The other thing is if you write a program that's of any length, what if it turned out that this oil loop charge, it was really complex, and it was going to be hundreds of lines and maybe call other routines? Then maybe I'd do that. And then maybe for the flush charges, maybe Eric would do that. All right? Maybe for the miscellaneous charges, maybe Micah would do that. The other thing that you do when you start to modularize a program, all right, is that now it's much easier if you take the program into divisible units and you give those units to different people. There's just one thing that they have to worry about doing. So again, this code that you see right here says, if that's checked, take my total and add 26 to it. If that's checked, take my total and add 18 to it. If neither one of these are checked, it's going to still be 0. If that one's checked and not that one, it's going to be 26. If that one's not checked and that one is, it's going to be 18. If they're both checked, it's 44. As I mentioned to you, that's 4 possible values. So OLC will contain either 0.0, 26.0, 18.0, or 44.0. And that's what I'll return back into my calling program. All right. All right, so that's the first one. Then let's take a look at the flush charges. Very similar in nature. All right. It's going to be these two. All right. So I'm going to come in here, and the first thing I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to create a local variable. And I call these FC for flush charges. And does everybody understand this? If you look on the screen right here, the system, C#, the compiler, doesn't care. I made this a double, and I can say 0.0, or I can just say 0. And if I just say a 0 like that, the system basically puts in the 0.0 for me. So I can do it either way. But what I can't do is I can't do that. Because now I'm trying to put a decimal place on something that I'm saying is whole number only. All right? These are the kind of things that hopefully, when I say those, you're like, well, duh, and that's good. All right, if that's the case. And FC is going to be what I want to return here. All right, so in between these, I'm going to do the same kind of thing I just did. Oops, sorry. Notice on this one, I left the equal true off just to show you. Again, you can do it either way. If it's easier for you to understand like this, then do it. This is less typing, and most people will tell you that after you've been doing this for a while, it's actually easier for them to understand. All right. And that's that whole routine. Any questions conceptually on what's going on there? So we've written the first routine that's going to add up these two, the second routine that's going to add up these two. The next one is going to be very similar, but there'll be 3 instead of 2. And this one, as you probably guessed, is going to be a little bit more work. All right? Now, I don't hear a lot of typing, so my guess is most everybody is just about done with it. Hopefully you are, because I'd like to go through and do the next one. So the next one is the miscellaneous charges, which is, again, inspection, muffler, or rotation. But we're going to write it the same way. So in this miscellaneous charges, I'm again going to come in and create a variable, a local variable. I'll call MC for miscellaneous charges. And that's the one that I'm going to end up returning. And now I'm going to have 3 ifs in here instead of 2. This one's tighter. So after doing all this, it's a good time to save. I now have this and this and this. I've got my clear stuff, so what's left? The parts and labor and my final totals. Everything else is done. All right. Now, I don't have to do it now, but one thing I am going to do is I'd like to check and make sure that this is being added correctly, and this is being added correctly, and this is being added correctly. There's no way for me to do that right now, because there's no way, because I'm not calling the routines for oil and lube, for the flushes, and for the miscellaneous. So I am going to jump back up to my calculate button, and I'm going to start putting some code in there. All right. That's the total charges. Okay. And I'm going to say my oil lube is equal to oil miscellaneous. Now, ideally at least, this makes sense to you as far as what's going on. This is going to add up what's in those two check boxes, and it's going to return that and put it into here. This is going to add up what's in the two flush check boxes and put the result, return the result there. That's going to take whatever's in those three check boxes and put the result there. This is going to add up what's in those three check boxes, and I'm just going to throw it in here. All right. Now, right now, it's better because I'm calling the routines, but there's still, I'm not printing out those values anyplace. So if I want to, I can come out there and do this. So you don't have to type this in, but I want to prove that it's working so far. So I'm going to type in a message box, and I'm going to say something like this. Oil, lube equals I'm keeping it really, really simple on purpose. All right, so I'm going to come in here now and I'm going to grab, I'm just going to highlight everything in the first 3 routines. Now I'm going to click calculate. Well, it says my oil lube is 44. Good. 26 plus 18. My flushes is 110. 80 plus 30. Good. My miscellaneous is 135. 15, 115, 135. So at least now it appears to be working. That makes sense to everyone? I'm not going to take the time. I could go back, run it again, and check some of them and uncheck other ones. All right. The only thing I will go back and double check is this. I'll undo everything. And I'll click calculate. And they're all 0. That's all good. So every other thing would be a permutation where I had some stuff checked and other stuff not checked. All right. I oftentimes do that, and that's actually a much better way to code than to just type everything in. So now I can take this, and I can just comment all of it out. All right. I could uncomment it later if I'm going to make changes or whatever. All right. So we've done our oil lube charges. We've done our flush charges. We've done our miscellaneous charges. All right. We're making progress, or at least I like to think we're making progress. So what's left? Well, 3 routines. Other charges, tax charges, and total charges. All right, and just so you see this, if you don't look up on the screen here, this will be the easiest one to write, the last one. Because what that one is going to be is it says add this, and this, and this. That's all it is. All right, I'm not going to do it now. We could, but let's just keep doing it in order. All right, so we're down to other charges. And there's actually a couple things that we have to be leery of here. First of all, what we put here, does this make sense to everybody, what you put there? Not there, I'm sorry. Here, that's the number of hours of labor you had. That's not the labor charge. So if you put a 10 there, that means you had 10 hours of labor at $20 an hour. So the total that'll come down here, it will be 200. Does that make sense to everybody? So we have to make sure of a few things. First of all, that better be numeric. All right, and it better be positive. We could put some kind of an upper cap on there if we wanted to. You know, maybe you can't have a labor charge of more than $10,000 or something. All right. This is going to be just a raw number. So again, that has to be numeric, and that has to be greater than 0. Could be equal to 0 if we didn't have any parts, but it has to be at least 0. We might not have had any work done either if we just bought parts. All right. So those are all things that we have to think about. All right, so as we come in here, I'm going to come in and I'm going to have 3 variables. I'm going to have a double that's going to be called labor hours. Set that equal to 0.0. Another double that's called labor, and that's going to be the number of hours times $20 an hour, and that's going to be 0.0. And then finally, I'm going to have another one that's just called OC, which is going to be my total of other charges. And that's what I'm going to end up returning when I get done. Now, you all know this by now. I'm getting the squigglies here, and I'm getting the squigglies because, whoop, that's not spelled very well, is it? I'm getting the squigglies here because I'm not using labor hours or labor anyplace, but the squigglies left here because that's the value I'm returning. All right. This is probably the most typing in this particular routine that we do in the whole thing. Because again, this is the other charges. So we've got to make sure, as I mentioned, numeric and greater than or equal to 0. Numeric and greater than or equal to 0. I did it with try catches. You could do it with parse. There's a lot of different ways that it could be done. All right. So sorry, but I'm going to type for a while. Convert. Leave that up there for a second, then we'll go back and write the catch. Does everybody understand, if you look up on the screen here, the importance of that line right there? If I didn't have any other charges when I returned down here, I want to make sure that what I'm returning is 0. All right, because it's a thing, a lot of times people forget that, or they set it to some value that's not 0 for whatever reason. All right. Yes. 0 really would be a default, and there most of the time, depends on the type of program you're writing, but most of the time putting 0 in as a default value makes sense. I mean, sometimes it doesn't. You know that. If it's something that absolutely could not be 0, then you probably don't want to make it 0. No, what I'm saying is we need this, but this line right here, we want to make sure that if none of this is hit, in other words, if we don't have any charges, we want to make sure that what we're going to end up returning in the end is this. All right, you'll see the rest of that when we come down and do the catch in just a minute. Now we're going to write the catch in just a minute, and then what I will do for next class, because this is going to put us near the end of the period, there's one more try-catch. This try-catch right here is going to be for the parts. We have to write a similar one for the labor. All right, so we'll end up picking it up there next time. And then The other routines, the tax charges, it's actually pretty simple. All right, for the tax charges, we have to say, was the parts greater than 0? If it is, you want to take whatever that is and add to it a 6% tax, which will go there. And then again, when we get done, we want to add up what's there, all the stuff that's in there, and that's going to be our total fees. So we'll go through that next class, but we'll go through it kind of quickly because I want to make sure there's enough time to go over the material that's in Chapter 6. Especially if you're having a hard time catching on, it'd probably be in your best interest to at least try to page through Chapter 6 by the time we start the next class. Yes? Why didn't we? Just because the program already, when I got done with it, it was like 400 lines. The question was a very good one. The question Eric just asked was, why didn't we do the validation for this in a separate routine? And yes, we should have. All right, I mean, I could be like kind of a jerk and say, well, that's for you to do on the assignment. No, I'm not going to do that. But you're right. I mean, it's a very good point. All right, that would have been a good idea to do the validation for this one in another routine and the validation for the other one we're going to do in another routine. All right? So we've got our try in here, and what we have to catch basically, all right, is a format exception. So hopefully you've got that typed in. All right. And I'm going to put it in another message box, so I'm just going to steal the one here and I'll make some changes to it. Now it's not an out of range error. It's an invalid input error. And parts cost must be numeric and greater than or equal to 0. And I've said this kind of thing to you before. When I say this, believe me, I don't think I'm funny when I say this, and I'm not trying to be funny. This is going to be set up so if the person puts something in there that's non-numeric, we're going to give them a message. But as I've mentioned to you before in other classes, there's no accounting for human stupidity. So if they keep putting in non-numeric values, it'll keep showing them this. All right? And if this is the case, I want to do the same stuff I'm doing here. All right? Does this make sense to people? Okay, you put in something non-numeric. You give them an error, you blank out the field, you set the focus back, and you return what's going to end up being 0.0. All right? Here, you tell them it was invalid, you come in here, boom, you blank it out, you return OC. Does all that make sense? We're doing the same thing both times. Technically, what we could have done is we could have taken these 3 lines of code in here, these 3, and we could have added another thing that we haven't really talked much about, which is a finally block in here. And we could have gone and taken those 3 lines and put them in here. Then we wouldn't have needed them here or here. And that's actually a cleaner way to do it. C# allows for a finally block, so does Java. Not all languages do. I just decided to keep it out. All right? Yes. Best practice is to always use a finally block if for something like that. I mean, again, the idea is you don't want to duplicate code. All right? So if I get down to here, if I get down to this point, you don't have to put in the comment, but I'm putting in a comment here. Valid number was input for parts. In other words, it's greater than or equal to 0. Okay, that's all I know. I still don't know what it is. It could be a gazillion or something, but I know that it's valid that way. we're still not done. There's still more to write in this routine because we have not yet written the stuff in here for our labor. Okay? And one last thing, if you look up on the screen here, I hope you all know this. Does that make sense, what's in gray up there now? That says formatted to 2 decimal places. Now, if you're really a stickler, and I want to show you something, so if you don't look up on the screen, I can do this. And that does it to currency, which automatically puts in the $ for you. I'm going to recommend that you don't do that, because if you're testing, a lot of times, so that's going to put $ in all this stuff, but when you're testing, a lot of times you just want to change a value or two. So you change a value or two and you click it again. Now it doesn't work because the values you have in there have $ in them, which are illegal input values. So I'd recommend keeping it the way that I've got it. Not that you have to do it that way. All right? So what we'll do on Wednesday is, and I'll have it written as soon as you come in here, but we're going to write a similar try-catch. So we're up to right here. So we've got that much code to do. That's the other try-catch, and then that's the rest of the program. So we're talking about 30, 40 lines, something like that. But I'm going to run through that quickly. All right? And then when we get done, we're going to jump right into Chapter 6 and talk about modularization. Does all that make sense? All right, so I'm going to leave that up here. Let me just stop taping because there's, any questions? All right, so the assignment has not been formally assigned. It's formally assigned on Wednesday. But as always, and some of you are taking advantage of this, I've got that it's due Wednesday, April 1st, but it's usually that Friday that I end up grading things. So if you have it in by Friday, that's okay. All right. And if you think, well, I've gotten in stuff late and you've taken off, I'm trying to do that for the benefit of those people who are turning it in on time. All right, you say, well, you're being unfair to me. Well, then when you fill out your course evaluations at the end of the semester, then write that down.